I just wanted to start too. I want to welcome everybody here too, and thanks for coming out on your Sunday morning and afternoon to these panels. It's really sort of a testament to your personal involvement and investment in the Chicago art community that you're here, spending this hour and a half with us. Obviously, we are such a small group that. I'd encourage, some interactivity with us. Just try not to cut people off mid-sentence. That's all I'd say. But I certainly welcome questions as I go on through my narrative and my dialogue. And I really hope that this will be dialogical because this is, a roundtable discussion. This isn't a presentation per se in the traditional sense. This isn't a panel per se in that sense too, and I think that that's really fitting the discussion that we're going to have here today because this discussion is focused on issues that sort of relate to ideas of hierarchy in town, ideas of structure, inclusivity and community, and all of that. So with that in mind, that should try to sort of organize our interactions and all of that. Also, I encourage you to not shut off your cell phones and take them out, and please tweet along with us. It's hashtag art and shy is the tag we're using for this, so please get on your mobile devices and tweet along, just maybe mute them. So let's proceed. I want to thank Amanda and, of course, Locust for having us out, for organizing this, Expo Chicago, of course, and Ritchie for being sort of another organizing partner in Level, and then shout out to Western, who is not here, for lending us this gallery space and for personally giving me an opportunity to see Ryan's show because I did not see it because I was working when it opened and haven't been able to make it down since. So thanks to all our organizers and participants and hosts, and thank you to the panelists, of course, too. I really appreciate you guys coming out and taking your time to be here today and also to produce something for this panel. Again, another huge testament to the community that we have here and how we work. So before we really launch into it, I think we're all, fairly familiar with each other, but we'll do some introductions. I'm joined by Steve Ruiz, who's an artist, art critic, writer. He's the operator and sort of manager, producer of thevisualist.org, which is a citywide art listing website, so that has all the openings for certain days plus select events. Do you want to say any more about what you do?
That's pretty much what it is.
All right, great. And then Allison Kleiman, whose work is at the Paul Art Museum, of course, in Lincoln Park. She handles all the museum's social media channels. She collaborates with their, public relations department and marketing department for all of those efforts. So she's kind of like a one-person communications department for the university's art museum. She's also worked at Marwin, which is, of course, a nonprofit focused on arts education for underserved youth. She's also worked at Monique Malash, and she has served as the vice president for the board of directors for Sputnik Press. On the end is Lauren Pacheco, who is the executive director and co-founder of the Chicago Urban Art Society, an exhibition and creative use space located in the Pilsen community. It's really become a resource for policymakers and has helped to engage in public dialogue about issues that impact artists and creative enterprises within their community. And she's worked hard to bring the arts to a broader art audience and bridge cultural sector programming in Chicago's community. So thinking beyond what traditional gallery spaces can do, or maybe how they exist and operate normally. She's developed the Art in Public Spaces program for the 25th Ward, and that's a community public arts initiative connecting artists with opportunities, as well as preserving the historic legacy murals that are in the Pilsen community, especially, and Chicago generally. And I think very importantly, she's also created through this program a lot of new opportunities for artists to create in the city, to add new legacy to that, and also has done some really just amazing things with getting high profile artists who work in murals and street artists into the city. So each of the panelists will talk about their specific sort of endeavors. I've asked them to share sort of avenue of success, but also an avenue of failure, which I think is interesting, to make ourselves a little bit vulnerable, as well as to talk about things that have not gone as well and to learn from those types of things. And, of course, I am absolutely no exception to this sort of thing. So I wanted to start by sort of going back to the genesis for this panel, which is really an observation that I had a few months ago, and that was when the Chicago Tribune, and also if you know me or know my writing or know my sort of narrative on the city, you know that I do place a large value, and we can argue about this, and I hope we do. I do place value on major media companies like the Tribune, like the Sun-Times, and other, avenues, CBS, NBC, all of our local affiliates and the news organizations. I do place a lot of value on these media companies and their production, because they are, as much as we can write them off and say, oh yeah, nobody reads them, they're heavily read. They're the dominant voice of the city. They're also, I think it's critically important to understand that they're also the newspaper of record for what the city does. So that means, when we look back in 50 years, just like we are now as our historians looking back to, the 1900s or 50s or whatever to see what was going on in Chicago, these are also newspapers of record for that. They also hold, the political news that goes on, they hold all of that, the business news, all of that sort of thing. So they are crucially important. They aren't the only thing out there, of course, just like, there's, of course, this huge constellation of art media in Chicago, right? There's, New City, Reader. I'm not by any means, inadvertently denigrating those or downplaying them, but I think we really have to acknowledge that in terms of visibility, in terms of audience, in terms of, just circulation numbers, these are key places. So just to sort of mention that, again, the genesis of this panel was really when the Tribune launched this thing that they called Theater Loop. And I was really interested in that because... and here it is. So I was really interested in that because it got, a huge sort of push from internally in the company. They actually have a whole other dedicated web page for the Theater Loop too. It's headed up by Chris Jones. So it's really sort of this official recognition of the Chicago theater and performing arts community as this major thing that the Tribune's willing to invest in, that they're willing to put a critic in. So basically you can see that this is, essentially the same type of CMS, content management system, most likely in the background, just delivered under a different sort of presentation and skin. But again, I think it's just really important to note that this exists, because it immediately got me thinking, where's art?
Where's the art loop?
Yeah, where's the art loop in this? And where are we as an art community represented on the Tribune? And I've been also, going on about this for some time for me, in my writing too. Where are art critics? If sorry, your hotkeys are confusing to me.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. So if Chris Jones, here is the theater critic for Chicago Tribune, who's the Chicago Tribune's art person? Who's their narrative voice? Who creates that sort of structure? And this has gone into articles that I've written about how there's, in my opinion, a total lack of that person. I think we have not dominant because that's not really the right word, but we have consistent voices that are with us. We have, Jason Fallenberg. We have, a number of other people that are really, what's that?
Lori Waxman.
Yeah, Lori Waxman too. But I mean, again, Lori she writes for the Tribune. She writes for, a variety of other publications, not the least of which is Artforum and all of that. So, my consistent sort of criticism has been, why isn't this Arts in Chicago with Lori Waxman or Claudine Issei or something else? They're all eminently qualified, very articulate writers, and they have a great presence in our community. They have a great, style of writing, and I think that they have a really clear and approachable style of writing too. So it's not like it's a mismatch with sort of the more popular orientated Chicago Tribune versus they all write like Artforum talks. That doesn't fit in the Tribune. No, they write well for a newspaper that has a broad general audience. So anyway, that's been my question. So after this got launched and there's a big hubbub, it was sort of like, oh, well, that's, it's a great thing for the theater and performing arts community again, but, where are we? So where are we? We're right here, we're museums. So this gallery, your gallery, the whole ecosystem here that we think is very important, which is, the reason why we're here today, is not included here. Where are the reviews for gallery exhibitions? Where are the reviews? Where's the writing and the production? The record, crucially, the historical record of these things that go on, and that we'll be looking back to in 20 years or so. I don't see it. So I think it's also useful to look through museums, and very telling too. So it's not okay. So we have so this Greek exhibition, which could be art focused, but then what's that?
Or dairy focused.
Yeah, no, I mean exactly. So I think it's important to look at this type of coverage. Where art is, let's look at the type of coverage that it is. So this is museums, so that would ostensibly contain art. So we have this, which may or may not be art. It may be dairy focused. It's unclear. From that, what's that?
Oh man.
And then down to Elephant Campaign, to Garfield Park. I'm personally very happy that they're getting a new ceiling and roof for their conservatory. Unfortunately, it's not art. Cubs of Revelry, Adler, excuse me. Okay, so photo exhibition. So maybe this, I think it's worth noting, this is behind a paywall. Also, quick fact too, if you guys ever want to get into these types of stories that are hidden behind paywalls, just take the URL, throw it into google.com, and it'll bring up the actual article. So that's my quick tip about how to bypass the Tribune's paywall. So anyway, they're not... So the museums is ostensibly containing the art, but any sort of digging does not really reveal where, what art coverage there could be. Yeah, Jason.
Can I just interject just for 1 second?
Yeah, please.
Unless my history is wrong on this, when Alan Artner was heading up the theater thing and all that, and Tribune made changes, and the art coverage used to be sort of lumped into that, like all in one. They made that sort of commercial decision to go all in on the theater and ditch the art. Is that incorrect? I seem to remember it that way.
Yeah, I mean I think that's another important thing, is that that's the way it seems. But I think transparency is a real issue here too.
Absolutely.
But I think too, I'll sort of get to some of the possibilities about why that decision is made within like a media company. But you're also not wrong. Like Alan Artner did. He was the head critic, and then 2008 came, which brought with it there's long before then print
restructuring.
Yeah, and then the bankruptcy, which they've only just emerged from, and all of that type of thing. So there are multiple reasons why we end up here, and there's a long history there too. But I think that the question there is, within each of those, has art really ever been given its due within these media companies, and especially the Tribune? And I would say maybe to no. And then I think too, let's look over, like I'm saying, let's look over to the Sun-Times, which would be our sister major daily of record in Chicago too. So in Sun-Times, again, if we try to find art, and I'm not going to belabor this point too much, again, first of all, you probably would look under entertainment, which I think indicates quite a lot about where this stuff is going. So we look under entertainment, and there's not even museums here. There used to be like galleries. There was a gallery tab for a while, but I kept my eye on that for like 3 months, and it never added any content to it on the Sun-Times website. So, if anything, the situation at the Sun-Times is identical or worse, where we don't even have museums represented in any sort of continual, cohesive way. And I'm not saying either that there aren't people writing about art at the Tribune, there aren't people writing about art at the Sun-Times. It's just invisible, both in terms of what we're showing to the world, and also the way they're internally organizing their content and their production. So like I'm sort of demonstrating, we're at this place where people who know about exhibits and everything, they're not the ones, you guys are here in this room, I'm not really worried about you guys finding art exhibitions or keeping up with what's going on, because everybody's tuned in. How do we reach a broader public that's becoming interested in art, that wants to make those sorts of first steps, and how do we reach the casually interested public that wants to learn more about what's going on? I'm not seeing ways within those types of mainstream places that make that possible.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you talked to anyone at the Tribune or the Sun-Times and found out who is responsible for not letting this exist on their websites? Or is there even one person, or is it just the attitude in general? Or
This is just very.
What's that?
The art stories are in there. They're actually in Splash now, which is their.
Right. Yeah.
There are some.
Yeah, because I read, there are movies that we do read, but I wonder who is responsible for not letting it live with the way it properly should.
Yeah. Well, they do have. I have not contacted the Tribune or attempted to interview them or attempted to write this, what I perceive as a wrong, because mainly I'm not. If they want to hire me as a consultant, I will do that for them. But they're pros, they're a major media company, and it's interesting because the Tribune Media Corporation owns the LA Times, right? So the LA Times, if you look at them, they're completely different. They have a full-time, consistent critic in Christopher Knight, who's actually, he's been there for a while. You can probably, criticize his writing to, any extent that we can criticize anybody, but at least you can say he's like a respected voice within the community that's been there for decades at this point. They just hired on Caroline Miranda. So, again, they're actually expanding the arts coverage, and it's a vital part to the Los Angeles Times structure. So it's sort of completely different. And I mean, I think that's also a crucial difference of why we've seen a rise in LA's stature within the art world. I think, too, I'm not really interested in, inner city competition with, everybody has to be, New York's number one and we're number two, or LA's number two and we're number three, and then Miami's number three and now we're number four, I'm not really interested in that, because those things will sort themselves out over time. I am interested in this sort of thing where it's so if you do want to find out about what's going on here, you can, and I think that, it's a real danger to sort of write this off, the situation as being sort of insignificant, or being oh, well, that's, mainstream, lamestream press type of stuff.
But it was a sneaky death, too, because when they got rid of Alan Artner, they didn't know one talked about it. It just disappeared.
Right,
And,
exactly.
I think Alan Artner was awful, but at least there was something.
Exactly.
That's usually how those board decisions, budgetary shifts just get done.
Right.
It's a complete lack of transparency.
Yeah, well, and it was done when Alan Artner was laid off. He was one of 40 some or 20 some. I forget which wave of layoffs it was exactly, but he was one among many. So, and then it was funny because 2 years later they were coming back, and if you actually got the physical paper, they were touting new and expanded arts coverage. So it's I think there's this real mismatch between they can have their cake and eat it too type of thing, where we don't see coverage online, but if you dig in if you have the paper, there's the splash section, which ostensibly contains coverage, or the A&E section in the Tribune, which also has arts coverage. But again, I think it's important to look at this type of, are they covering gallery exhibitions, or is it museums only? Are they, is it for that writer who's covering the gallery shows, are they a staff critic, or are they special to the Tribune? Because, and that also goes to sort of the longer term ecosystem, if they're special to the Tribune, they're a contractor, they're not full-time, they're not having benefits, so there's a real question of sustainability there, and for the long term especially. So again, if the arts community is not included within these types of things, what does it mean for us if we're invisible to our major daily newspapers, essentially, if we're being overlooked? So sort of my opinion is that if the newspapers aren't talking about us, we have to talk about us, and we have to be much louder, which is what this sort of panel is about, really. So I think it's also important to keep in mind, and the risks of not advocating for ourselves in a more cohesive and strategic way over time, keeping on this sort of path of semi-invisibility here. Will there be large-scale art initiatives into the future that try to use the city as a fabric for creating, sort of an event or anything like that, large-scale public art installations? Chicago Art Loop Alliance just axed their Loop Art project, which was a major initiative, and no matter what your critique might be of the projects that have come out of that, that was a major, major high-visibility project, the significant budget, significant infrastructure support. You can't get more high visibility than downtown Chicago in the Loop, and they've axed it.
Jessica Stockholder piece last summer that opened, or last spring, whatever that was.
Right.
Which was covered in the Tribune.
Yeah.
One of the only
Yeah.
things I remember last year being really
It was hideous,
covered.
but that's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, well, and that's,
It didn't last long,
but they're not doing it,
Why did they axe that program?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, we should put Tristan Hill on the spot now.
Yeah, no, I mean, they seem to be moving their new thing is now to work more with the theater district. So they're moving, again, this is moving away, and I don't want to put like art kids versus drama kids, like that old type of high school situation, but like, yeah, but I do think that it's worth noting that their energies are being redirected away from the visual art into basically supporting the commercial theater program there. So will there be large-scale art initiatives in the future if we're not as visible as we could be? Will there be significant support from the city for the visual arts? Will there be grants that continue to be available? Will the Chicago Cultural Center continue to hold their exhibition schedule, one, in all the places and all the galleries at the Chicago Cultural Center? Two, at the same frequency and at the same rate that they've done. Three, with the same curatorial staff. Four, will the Chicago Cultural Center continue to be called the Chicago Cultural Center, or will it be renamed after, Richard Daley's wife, who somehow saved it from demolition? Are we going to name yet another publicly owned structure after a politician who, I think it's very valid to ask the level of corruption that was inherent in his administration? Do we want another thing named after somebody, or do we want it named after Chicago and the arts here?
Is there actual talk of changing the name?
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
absurd.
Nora Daly Center?
Yeah, to changing the
It's just
Chicago.
being a giant park, right?
That's Maggie
Across this-
Daly, so that's
Oh, right.
so that they want another Daly. So
Because we have
because there's a definite lack of
Empire,
Dailies.
family empire.
Yeah. So will there be the Department of Cultural Affairs? We've already seen it change to the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events within the last few years. So we've already seen that addition of cultural affairs being added on to special events. So so all of a sudden it's not just arts, it's not just public sculpture, it's not just exhibitions, it's now Jazz Fest and Blues Fest and the Taste of Chicago all rolled into one. Will we continue to see, we've already seen the removal of the Chicago Artist Resource being removed over to the CAC, which is great. The CAC has really changed itself in the past few years and become a really positive force. But again, the Chicago Artist Resource is a hugely valuable thing for everybody coming into the city. That could be subscription only. You could privatize that.
I don't think it's great that CAC runs it.
Okay, well, see, there you go.
I think it's a huge mistake. Yes, they have money and staff and all that, and can, they've contracted otherwise a brand strategy people, who are Nancy and David Frey, full disclosure, huge collectors here in the city, to rebrand the website and to rebrand CAC and CAR. But I think they're going to take it over. I mean, I don't see how that could stay autonomous over a long trajectory.
Yeah.
I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, and just the amount of, if you know the CAR website, the amount of data that's there, basically everybody who who I know really uses that as a job portal, as a grant portal, as an exhibition portal. Nothing good on that front page. So anyway, continuing on, just these are questions that we need to ask. Can Chicago continue to be a leading city for contemporary art if we don't make our things more visible to the outside world and to each other, crucially, too? If we're not talking to each other about what's going on, even if you're not even vaguely interested in it, how can we tell the outside world about that? So we want to think about those questions as we move through the panel here. And I also want to highlight some challenges to these types of suggestions about getting more centralized and more communicative. The decentralized structure of the art ecosystem is a huge issue. This is a great example because this panel is run by, we're hosted by 3 different organizations all coming together in a collaborative way. There's definitely synergistic energy there, but there's also a challenge of no formal relationship, no formal structure, nothing like that. There's no office space or anything like that. That's a challenge. I think in terms of what I was talking about earlier of, this, theater loop, the art industry doesn't generate revenue like other sectors of cultural production here does, Here you can see how much, all tickets $27 or less. The way we generate revenue is predominantly on art sales, right? Not on ticketed events. So we've seen sort of different movements to more to more experience-based art events, actually, especially from Tristan, who I was going to mention. I'm glad you did. So things like Built, which was art in our exhibition, limited time only, in shipping containers, and Art on Track. So we've seen moves to those. Lauren's done some things like that. So there are moves to that, but predominantly we generate revenue through galleries in particular, and almost only generate revenue through art sales. Museums, a little bit off, or a little bit different. Of course, we have a lack of funding is another challenge to this. Of course, everybody on the panel here today is here of their own goodwill and all of that. We're not getting paid, which is just fine and great. But, there's no, again, it's this sort of full-time, who's working, who's constantly building. Lack of staffing, similar type of problem. I think it's worth asking, is Chicago's art community as wired and online as they could be? I don't know. I assume that a lot of us in this room are probably all on a lot of different social media platforms just by nature of this event. But what about the larger sort of art spectrum and community out there? Are they as online as they could be? So, go ahead.
I'm thinking it's an interesting moment maybe to just to have a tiny pause and think about, okay, great, so this is the landscape we're dealing with, and obviously I'm just learning about Chicago and how media works here. But sort of, and it's easy, it's always easy to sort of, to figure out what the limitations are. And sometimes, and to be like, this is our limitation and we're trying. And then I think we have a weird advantage today where we have so many different platforms. So it's and I'm sure you're getting there, but where is it that we can take, as you said earlier, take it into our own hands and kind of try to think of maybe even brand new structures that are going to be effective. Cool,
sure.
Just cool. Things that will actually be inspiring and interesting, and anyway, so I'm kind of interested to see what and how we can think about those. Well, that's exactly where I'm moving to because, and I'll sort of jump right there actually because otherwise we'll just talk about the problems all day long. It's easy too, and it's funny because Chicago's such a sophisticated city with so many amazing institutions, and right, I can see that there's this frustration when the biggest newspapers and paying attention to what's up or just content scrambled. So
and we've had that.
It is a unique problem though because it is such a big sophisticated city. So.
And we've had that. We've had this conversation again and again and over and over again. So, but I do want to highlight it in terms of being a major obstacle.
Yes.
So and what I'm suggesting here is too that pulling together and making ourselves more visible through cooperation can be a way to call attention to ourselves because these places aren't doing it. So I've actually been, and I think I'll just jump right to it, is that I'd recommend that, we all start using Twitter way more than, and make that the dominant platform, than using other things and use that as the primary communication tool.
What do you mean what sort of conversation or communication are you talking about over Twitter?
What's that?
The conversations that are happening where else?
It's almost almost like we need
where
to
are they now?
Yeah.
If they're not on Twitter, where are they now?
Some
I think they're not
some
on
are
there.
non-existent. I would
Yeah.
expect because not enough people are utilizing Twitter. I mean, for something as basic as like what you do at DePaul Art Museum, like every all the stuff I get from you guys, I usually see it on Twitter before I get it in my email.
Yeah.
You know, and then when people break out and debate different things or get into different heated arguments, some of that spills over to Facebook, but most of it originates on Twitter and then sort of continues in person, and it's an enormously useful sort of starting point anyway, just like an aggregator if you run your timeline the right way.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I wanted to recommend is that we go back, because and I want to talk about one of the challenges that I'm specifically facing at the Museum of Contemporary Art, is that if you guys aren't familiar with this equation right here, this is actually the EdgeRank algorithm for Facebook, more or less, because it's a proprietary algorithm. We don't actually know what it is. But everything you see on Facebook is curated, for lack of a better word, for you. So this is something this is the algorithm that determines what you see on Facebook, how you see it, when you see it, and why you see it. So, and this, if you guys watch The Social Network, that movie, with Michael Cera or whatever, it was about Facebook and all of that. Yeah, what's that?
Jesse Eisenberg.
Is it?
Kind of looks like
They're the same.
Okay, never mind. All right, my bad. Yeah, whoever. It's with that guy. But that part where he's writing on the... What's that?
What is cute and what is not.
I stand corrected on that. But when he's writing on the window, like this algorithm, this is what it's turned into. So everything that you see on Facebook is delivered to you due to a variety of factors, mainly these types of interactions. So basically something I struggle with in my work at the museum is making sure people actually see our stuff on Facebook, because we have like 107,000, likes for the museum, but only a small fraction of that total ever see everything that we post. This is a huge issue for me because we've basically gone from my very best days when I worked at the museum are now no longer existent, and like our very worst days are now our very best days, because when Facebook IPO'd, they wanted more money, more people paying ads, and of course the best way to do that is to turn down the volume. So
we just did our first paid post on Facebook because we only have like 1,900 followers, and if you put a post out, it would say like 12 people saw this, and you're like, oh, F you. So we just spent $7 to promote a post for an event, and it got to like 5,000 people, and we're like, I don't understand how that happened. But 50 people showed up to the event, which is good for us. It was a Saturday lecture with a quilter, and it was a great turnout, but no one there found out about it from Facebook. We had 8 people RSVP to the event. I think 2 of those people actually came.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Facebook sucks.
I've never seen an MCA or a DePaul post for that matter on Facebook.
I don't even see DePaul posts on Facebook, and I'm the admin.
Yeah, so this is why I'm suggesting Twitter as being a more powerful, more democratic, and more horizontal platform for information sharing. So one of the things that I'm advocating for is a much wider use by the Chicago community of Twitter, going back to that element of hashtags. I think that there's like a very stupid level of hashtagging, which is like hashtag my Dunkin', that's my Dunkin' Donuts story. I love that. Or everybody is making hashtag into a thing, and it, kind of makes me sick when I hear it on the radio so much. But they actually do serve a serious function. They've powered political protests all over the world. They've been ways that you can coordinate different types of activity, and I think that that's really what we need to return to here. And they've been so successful, they've even birthed a whole new political theory, which is hashtag activism. Which I think is somewhat of a pejorative name, because, I don't know, hashtag just seems to have such a negative connotation with it these days. But anyway, I would really propose moving back to that powerful discovery function of what a hashtag is, and diving into a single element within a Twitter stream and connecting to different individuals who are also using that element. If we're all posting to one particular tag, that's a very powerful way that anyone who's even remotely interested in things can discover new things, can go into things. So one of the things that I'm proposing, perhaps the only objective of this panel really, is to embrace the discovery function of the tag, use its potential as a connecting force and occasionally unifying force. So that would be one thing that I would propose, and be a concrete delivery of what this panel does.
Would that just be one fixed tag the Shy Arts, whatever, as opposed to, because sometimes half the battle when you're at an event or a round table or whatever is finding out what hashtag you're supposed to be using, and
Right,
it's very confusing, and so that's why most of us just skip it. So if we could just have sort of one hashtag, for stuff going on in Chicago, that I think would be extremely useful.
Yeah, and this is a good time for you to.
Are people already using that?
What?
The Art and Shy.
Well, I looked onto it, and Lauren had actually used it like a few years ago, or like maybe a year ago.
Yeah, it's like yours from like 12
Whose galleries to Chicago here?
Yeah.
What's that?
Whose galleries to Chicago here? Oh, you already used it today, right?
Sorry.
Somebody just
Oh, I did.
tweeted
Yeah.
it, right? Yeah. So.
But I wanted to interject too. I think part of that kind of discovery of hashtags too, because we don't live in the vacuum that we always feel like we live in sometimes, because we're part of a larger civic fabric. And when we think about developing new audiences, I think it's not only important for us to have one structured tag possibly that's kind of our anchor, but then I always put hashtag Chicago. Like I always think about like what other demographic could be down with this exhibition right now, because then you start getting people who are like, if you search for Chicago, you're going to get everybody's talking about everything, but if they happen to see my post with a picture from this wonderful show, then it might get a body in there. So I think that it's a little bit of both,
Like you and
anchors
Green.
and then also crossing into others.
And I think that's that's definitely like a good point too, and that's the type of, I think that's the type of like sort of general awareness that we really want. And I think it's interesting to point out that the dance world actually has this, and they use hashtag Shy Dance, and a lot of the dance companies use this tag to just post everything, especially Hubbard. But you can see how much this is sort of combined different companies together, So again, that's what I want to sort of point to for this. So, Steve, do you want to take this over?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Peter. For the people who don't know me or came in late, I run the Visualist, which is a calendar of the visual art events in the city.
Which I have to say has become, in my opinion, everyone's go-to. You want to know what's going on? Go to this.
That's great.
That's really important.
Yeah, and every city that I've visited, like every time I visit a different city, I look and see, okay, what is the art scene there, and how is it organizing itself? How is it making itself known? If not to the broader world, at least to itself. And so this project has been, I inherited the data and built around from On the Make, which existed for a year. And since then, it serves basically three functions. One is for people who want to plan their weekend of art seeing. So what's coming up? It lists what's, today.
Hopefully people didn't go to Design Cloud.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what the hell?
Oops.
Not my fault.
Who runs this?
Why is it on Design Cloud? Oh, well.
That's for last
Oh, I see.
That's all right. We're it's happening right now, right? We're actually here.
Wait, that's not the one at 4.
There's one at 3 that is a sign.
Okay. Well,
And that
I
is
should
that.
say, I take data in, I post it. Sometimes I have to go get it myself, but
It's an imperfect
there you
system.
go. It is a very imperfect. Like sometimes people are texting me like,
I'll take responsibility. There's 2 Evites, one for the Western Exhibition and one for the Design Cloud.
Ah, I see.
So
well, let me know. Maybe I'll edit that real quick. But so there's that. There's like, okay, what's happening this week or later today, so I can plan my weekend, do a gallery hop or whatever. At least I know what I'm missing. And then it serves the second function of like what's on right now. If I want to go see the art shows that are up right now, I can use this theoretically. And then the third function would be as an archive of all the shows that are here, especially shows that are at alternative spaces, places where it normally doesn't get recorded or archived, and it's very hard to find out. But as of this morning when I checked, we have just over 3,600 art shows, exhibitions in Chicago and around Chicago since 2009.
May I just ask, I'm curious, so is independent, people are able to independently upload the information so that it's not like you necessarily need to know about every single thing happening and going and doing it?
Well, I try.
I'm sure
it's kind of a blend.
but people can.
Yeah, there's
they can go and they can do it. That's cool.
So I've gone through the process for Lloyd Dobler. I'll upload the information
Sure.
and then it awaits for approval.
Yeah.
It'll go up, essentially.
Yeah, it's a mix between me going out and finding things and putting it on there, and then people submitting their own, which is great because a lot of spaces are, happen once,
Sure.
or just I wouldn't know about it. So,
I'd be curious the rates of people independently doing it on their own.
it gets more and more every month.
Really?
I would say right
That's
now it's
okay.
about 70-30 in terms of how much gets submitted to through this and how much I have to go out. Actually, it might be more than 70-30. But I don't post everything. It's a kind of a curated list.
Yeah.
Sometimes people put up jazz concerts, and I'm like, well, no. And,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
Or sometimes it's just art shows that I'm like, even though this is an art show, I don't. The specific readership that I'm serving with this project might not be interested in it, or I don't think it might.
Yeah.
I have to make that kind of critical decision just to reduce the amount of noise because there's a lot more happening in Chicago than I think.
But that curation is what makes it a usable tool for
Yeah.
everyone in this room. Because I go there and I don't have to go through.
Right, it's been vetted.
It's not like, the Chicago Arts Resource is great, but they also have a lot of crap on there.
What's that one?
Chicago Artist Resource, we were talking about.
Chicago, like you're talking
CAR,
about.
yeah.
And so
It's a similar, you can submit calls for artists and all kind of stuff, and there's a lot of noise.
but it's not
sort of,
vetted, so it's crappy. No one trusts it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really
It's an
more.
issue of trust. It's interesting in these platforms.
I totally trust visuals.
And the car is more for jobs.
Oh,
I need an intern.
So
But it's got many functions,
It's kind of like a NIFA.
Yeah. It's Chicago's night.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an intern, you post it there.
Okay.
If you're looking for a job, you don't find it because you only find internships.
True.
That's for other interesting reasons about our field.
That's for another talk.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But I'm interested in the ways that other cities have. Wow, that's gonna.
Sorry about that.
Do
It's
a million
spooky.
times today.
Well, I will say, just to interject for a second, that in Miami, just because we sort of are both, we're like two kind of second cities in this sort of discussion, but we have a platform that was just started this past year that's so similar to yours.
What's it called?
It's called Infraculture. Infraculture.
Interesting.
And it was, for us, Miami is much younger in its cultural sort of life, and there's some creative practitioners there that have recently realized there is interesting stuff happening in the city, and actually a lot of people don't know about it, and how is it that we can, get, how is it that we can kind of aggregate this and have a curated list of things we can trust and go to, and that I don't know when you started the Visualist. Was it somewhat recently?
I picked up the Visualist in 2010. No,
Okay,
11.
so
Actually.
so only a handful of years, and I think it's interesting that maybe it's almost like the same timeline that there's been this desire to create these alternative voices that are actually quality. You can hit close and then proceed. Quality vetted sources for good content in contemporary visual art. It's weird that this is happening kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I mean, it's like I know who's using. Well, not I know who's using it, but I know the traffic and the data, and I can say that it's mostly other artists, other people within the art community in Chicago, and I guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's sort of like an element of like preaching to the choir, kind of, or like we're doing media, but we're only people who are interested in media or looking at media because we're kind of like checking how much people look at our media. So there's like a weird problem there. But anyway, not to derail you, but
no, I think it's just I might have a different view on the art industry as it exists in Chicago versus in other cities. I think. I mean, like the changes in the media platforms and the mainstream media have reflected this, that like most of the people who are interested in art are in the industry. I mean, Chicago, although it's a huge, great community, it still largely exists as a satellite of other art cities where art is sold and art is kind of consecrated and becomes historical and stuff. And hopefully that is moving in a direction where Chicago can be its own, write about itself, support itself, buy itself. And I hope that in 20 years people will say, yeah, Chicago, it's a great place for improv comedy, theater, and art. that would be wonderful. But it is not anywhere near that right now. So I think, like my project, and this is the way that Berlin does, my project at least, I hope that the people in the art community, which is the people teaching art in the city, or the people using Chicago as free rent and cheap studios, at least know about a lot of what's happening, which includes a ton of student work, a ton of independent galleries, and such. And the difference, maybe, I bring up the Index Berlin. They have a list of galleries that they post the events from. It's not open, it's just those galleries. And there's a lot of them, but it's just those commercial galleries.
right, and you can see they're also quite sponsored up.
Yeah, certainly. And that's fine. But,
and that's an interesting thing to me, is that this is a very monetizable format. I'm shocked that none of the, major media companies have attempted to try to harness this onto their websites. I mean, in a sense they have, because they got the Chicago Now, and they have, Stephanie and Jiraiya doing the top 5 for the weekend, so they've been willing to settle. But I'm consistently surprised they've not realized the value of this from a sheer traffic and, ad placement.
yeah, there's no reason why this couldn't exist on Chicago Tribune or
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Right.
It has to be a different sort of thinking, though, because I think from their mindset, they're thinking, theater ads, this is a proven monetizable format, and families come in and we can get hotel advertising, boat tours, and this and that. The art scene functions a little differently. But if people, if they could be convinced by a consultant such as Abraham or something like that, could.
I was saying that in jest.
But it is also very valid. Like there's the level of not knowing, or these people who, or maybe like even on the Berlin site. Okay, you have major art fairs, you have major galleries who are getting behind this. You have these institutions are aware of and interested in supporting this format, and that's very valid.
Yeah, I mean, when we did it in Chicago, I founded it along with the designer Chad Curry and Jenny Kendler of the Other People's Pixels.
Other People's Pixels?
Yeah, and the...
that's based out of Chicago.
Oh,
yeah.
Such a cool
She's on the cover of the Reader, wearing flowers.
She's going to do a great installation for NRDC. She's NRDC, Natural Resource Defense Council's first artist in residence, and she's doing some really cool stuff, and she's going to booth at Expo.
Yeah, and they have funded the Visualist since day one. I mean, that was one of the conditions of it existing. Yeah, so thankfully it's not a labor of love. Exclusively.
Can we go back to the idea of, so you have the Berlin site that has a great list of galleries and events, but then you have, and I want to kind of juxtapose it with Chicago, because you have the Visualist that serves as that purpose as well, but you also have Gallery Week in Berlin, that treats itself as its own entity. And you have Gallery Week in Chicago through Moody Meloche, who treats itself as its own entity, but doesn't link with these sites.
This is true.
There can be such mutual benefit in that, but it's like everyone's doing their own little thing and not talking to each other.
So Monique Meloche, she hosts a gallery weekend and tries to get everybody together to do stuff. Yeah.
But that's very
That's
heavily
not public.
collector
Yeah.
focused.
It's not public.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, they produce, in the sense, I think that maybe you're going for, they produce maps, they produce like those listings, so there is like collateral there that's very useful for visitors to discover, especially the things that are left out by like Chicago Gallery News, which is pay to play.
Right.
So, I mean, there is that level of usefulness.
But Gallery Views in Berlin is the same. It's the same model. It's going after VIPs. It's going after collectors. I think it's a little more integrated with the general public. I'm not sure I've been, but I just wonder. I just think there's a better way to do it.
I think, especially if, I mean, I'm totally fine with Gallery Week in Chicago being collector, based. I mean, it's, it's a collector-based industry. But I would like, how do I say it? There's a lot of resources that would be great for collectors to discover.
But if we're gonna think about
would be
the
nice.
vision of why we're interested in doing this, our goals are not necessarily so that all the galleries can sell more work. Like our goals are so that the city has a wider cultural understanding of what is happening in visual art, like in community building. So
I'd also like the galleries to sell a lot more work than they are.
Sure, but like community building is really what I feel like most of a lot of people are interested in, and then it's not like we're like, let's increase sales. How do we do it? Like that's not our goal.
I would almost argue that community engagement is not a priority for a lot of art galleries and artists in Chicago. I would say if I had a survey of artists and be like, would you like a really great review and really great coverage to come out in Chicago of this exhibition, or would you want a really great article and really great coverage to come out in London or in New York? I know personally as an artist I would pick the latter. It's just the direction of where not just sales, but also where historical consecration comes in, where you get sort of inscribed into like contemporary art, and that's at least as important as whether people on the L have ever seen your work, which is kind of not a very happy thought, but like
Right, no, but I mean, just to take it back to like a very kind of basic level, like say, for example, like to be a little abstract, like if we're talking about kind of building a media campaign here, like that's kind of essentially what we're talking about. Whenever you have a consultant come and build a media campaign, the first thing they're going to ask you is like, what are your goals? And so like there's actually like if we flatten it out like that, it's interesting. It's problematic, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
But I think go.
I was going to say, to add to what Steve said, you were looking at from an artist's perspective, like, what I want to write up in London or New York, whatever, or Chicago. From a gallerist's perspective, a nice little microcosm of what we're talking about was tried out last summer to, had some criticism. A lot of people, and I really thought it was great. I know a critic, artist, Pedro Velez, really thought Claire was onto something, but Claire Mullen, and put together with a group of people that worked really hard, the Brave New Art World thing to sort of revive this moribund art district. I mean, that was like really, that was really relevant in say like the late 70s, early 80s. It's been like sort of chugging along since, and it's been commercially successful for a few galleries there. But she met just in conversation, she met some like serious resistance from a couple of gallerists who were really unhappy with her trying to like bring street performance and try to popularize it and bring more people. And they're like, we don't want more people traipsing through.
Our clients don't care about this. They don't like it. Like that's not what they're interested in, right?
Yeah,
so
very old guard over there.
Very old guard.
And I see the resistance.
That's kind of maybe like a microcosm of what we're talking about.
So going off precisely what you said and what you were bringing up, it is quite a problematic issue, and I think when we think about arts and publics, it's highly geographical and from a planning issue. Like, we don't want a certain type of public in these spaces because they are market spaces in these galleries, and like the only places that exist for art are market spaces, except a place like Locust Project, which is a nonprofit. And I also work in Miami in the art scene.
Yeah.
The way that we try to tackle this is not through media, through education, because then you expand the public itself. So So for example, at the Museum of Contemporary Art, I was one of 6 teachers that went and taught like in different marginalized spaces to try to expand who gets to think about art and talk about art, and who gets to feel to have a voice, things like that. So that way, I don't know. It creates.
Well, to your point, it's interesting, and it's kind of like it's nice to conflate our two cities and our weird problems with this issue because we both have them, we have in a neighborhood of Miami. It's called Wynwood, and it's you know about it, and it's kind of a gallery district. There's a handful. We have a very small handful of serious art galleries in Miami. And then we have a lot of sort of like what I would probably say as a pejorative term, like a vanity gallery, people who are just kind of like doing this stuff, and it's not really relevant in the contemporary conversation, but it's happening. And then we have this thing called Art Walk, which a few years ago was just like this, you know, kind of everybody has an art walk in every city. Last couple of years, like it has become this like absolute circus where like the serious galleries shut down. Like they don't even open their doors because it's so popular, it's so intense. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of people out during the night, and it's almost like it completely like got overexposed without any kind of critical appreciation for what even is happening. So like that's kind of an extreme offshoot of like, if the people know, great, but like, do they care? Are they there for the right reasons? Is anyone interested in what they're seeing? No.
I think
like, and are the sales good? Like, no, not even.
Is that the antithesis to Art Basel, Miami, do you think? I mean, is that just a way of the public trying to deal with
Miami
that
has
shit
this
show?
bizarre problem, and in terms of a marketing standpoint, and not to talk about Miami, I know we're here to talk about Chicago, but like...
It's a definite relevant thing.
Yeah, well, there is this relevant thing where Miami has built out its scene backwards. Like, we've built from the fair back out into, like, literal cultural relevancy. Like, there's a very weird thing that's happening where it's taking steps back and back and back to, like, the beginning of why people make art, you know, like, at all. So there's this understanding in Miami that art is important and art is cool, but there isn't, like, there are very few discussions about, like, why and what is even interesting, or, you know, there's very, very weak academicism around it. Whereas here, there's so much academicism around it and not enough populace.
Yeah, and see, like, to your point, I'm so unconcerned with are people there, you know, are they learning something at the gallery walk? Are they there for the quote unquote the right reasons?
Right, yeah.
Like,
I know
don't
that's
think,
like very elitist, like it comes out as elitist, but
yeah, like I think it's
a similar to the art walk. It's just like literally like fire spinners and like
and that's fun. Like I get that, but
yeah, no, and I mean I think that's
Congo drums and street stuff.
But I also, I mean, I take a very sort of broad view of culture. Like, is fire dancing an element of culture? Hell yeah, like.
Sure, I mean, that's not to say, like, it's great that it's popular, but, like, the weird problem like, all the ingredients need to be there, I guess. And
I deal with it on a weird level because I work at a university museum and we're free.
Right.
So I have a kind of an old school boss who wants everything to be super academic, but no one wants to turn out on a Thursday night for an academic lecture. But if our most popular opening was a group show of young Chicago artists. We had 500 people show up. We had a food truck. It was awesome.
Right.
It was a great show, right? We got good press on it. I mean, we had involved millions of different members of the community. It was fantastic. But then, like, on the side note, like, on the flip side, we have, this quilt lecture I mentioned happening a couple weeks ago. We had 45 people show up. The questions were unbelievable. Like, this woman came in, she was like an 80-year-old quilter from Alabama. People that showed up were like hardcore quilters,
Like, so you really reached them.
So we reached them.
You reached them. How specific is that demographic?
I don't even know. But then on Monday, it was like, we only have 45 people there. It's like we couldn't have fit another body in the gallery, right?
That's great.
It was a fantastic, it was quality over. I think it was quality over quantity at that point. But it's kind of interesting to think about, like, we're free. We can't get. Sometimes there's 13 people that come into our museum every day. So it's like, and that, it was an average day. So it's like, I don't know what.
Well, there's the event-driven nature of these things too. There's
the
event-driven nature of these kinds of this industry, or this whatever we're going to call it.
I wanted to bring in the lowrider shows at the Chicago Urban Art Society.
Can you speak to
Yeah.
that?
Sure.
Do you want to turn it over, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Just because,
Are you done?
yeah, I mean, the reason I think this would be a good jumping off point is because a lot of the programming that galleries do, such as this one, is not necessarily public oriented. It's not or whatever.
Which there's
There
no
are spaces,
aesthetic
however, that are doing, like, I love Chicago Urban Art Society level of like community engagement or whatever. And I think some of that comes from the type of programming that they're allowed to.
Well, thank you.
But I mean, it's a self-empowerment. It's like you do whatever it is you want because you're defining it. You know, like
Yeah,
I think different people are defining their publics more narrowly or more broadly too.
I think, we all sort of develop our projects in many different ways, and I started Chicago Urban Art Society, just only for 4 years has it been called Chicago Urban Art Society. Prior to CUAS, we were called 32nd and Urban in Bridgeport. And this is, we bought a domain, Abe.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not.
That was me. I'm going to spell it wrong. I can't even spell it. Let's see. This is an old laptop. Whose laptop is
That's
this?
mine.
Man, I
Yeah,
had this
sorry.
like years ago.
it's on its way out, don't worry.
So we started this organization in 2006, my brother and I, and it was just kind of like this. Why can't I get this correctly?
It's not a Google, like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Google's on the right.
I'm
That's just for URLs in the top.
hold on, I'm trying to figure out how to use this keyboard here. What the heck? Sorry. Gabe, help me out here.
Yeah.
And
I'm unable to type.
just in the
in the
meantime,
mouse
while
pad.
we're figuring this
Sure.
out, I just want to pose a question which I hope you can address later
Sure.
after you've introduced your organization.
Mhm.
We have a big disconnect between the south side and the north side here in Chicago in many ways, not just art, but
Yeah,
everything.
and then I want to open up
And
Word
there's a lot of great arts programming happening in Bridgeport
What's that?
and
Word
in
2.5.
other areas like the Slow Gallery.
It
should be
all
up,
these
yeah.
amazing spaces.
Okay, cool.
And
Oh yeah, I actually have you on the
Oh,
rarely
awesome.
do
Okay, cool.
people, cross over. I feel like probably people in this room cross over because we do that.
Sure.
But it's how do we engage?
Hmm.
How do we get it to be a better crossover?
Yeah.
Love to hear you talk
Sure,
about that
sure.
at some point.
So real quick, I just wanted to go back to Abe's sort of presentation for this panel. And I thought it was a great opportunity to reflect on the Chicago Cultural Plan, which was a huge moment for Chicago and for Chicago's different sort of subcultures and niche creative sector groups. But I think, oftentimes we don't sort of talk about some of the negatives of the cultural plan, and I think one of the largest negatives, which is reflected in when you're bringing up the pages of the Sun-Times and the Tribune, is that it's really this focus on tourism and economic development, and it's really sort of wiped out the value of making art happening in communities. And so that's why you see this huge emphasis on museums, right? And that's why you see, all these splash pieces on stuff that's not, regarded in terms of, visual culture happening, and supporting the cultural plan in many ways. I do want to call someone out here in the room who can, I value and respect him greatly. Mike Hartnett back here is the associate publisher of New City. And
I don't do editorial.
he doesn't do editorial.
I do editorial.
Anybody want to place an ad? But he's incredibly insightful, and I was having a conversation with him about today and how I wanted to sort of roll out, some ideas and thoughts that we've had, some successes, failures, some major sort of fall on your face, really bad moments, and how much I hate Kickstarter. But really quickly, I just wanted to share with you, I work for Alderman Solis. I am one of 3 cultural liaisons that are 50 aldermen have. So it's me, it's like Alderman Moore, and maybe Moreno. I don't even know if he has one. And so I essentially came on board to develop an arts and culture initiative for him. And it's all of the murals that are on the 16th Street Viaduct. And this project came about because, one, we had severe graffiti in that particular area. There's a lot of gangs in this community. And so we were trying to think of a way that would address that, would make it sexy for the mayor's office, why we would invest money into a program like this, to make it more, okay. I won't scroll down. I don't know why I'm having great difficulty with this guy. Anyway, and so Alderman Solis brought me on board. It was only supposed to be a 6-month gig. I am going into 3 years this November. And I'm desperately trying to get out. I hope in the next 2 months I'll be out of there. But it was really this moment to offer artists an opportunity to work large scale in the public sphere. And it also encourages the mayor's office and some aldermen to have a dialogue around cultural policy and what it means to look at public art in a way, and it's not new, this is not a new idea, so I recognize that, and I often say that, using public art to combat graffiti abatement. But it's an opportunity to look at public art as infrastructure, because they look at it as ephemera. And so when we look at discretionary funds in aldermen's budgets, which go anywhere from $1 million to $2 million that they can use on any infrastructure improvements in the community, from ADA curbs to lighting, we want to be able to say public art is a form of infrastructure, so let's invest money. So Danny gave me $20,000 of his campaign money, right, that I used for 32 projects in the Pilsen community. So new public artwork and revitalizing some of the older murals. We then designated $140,000 in menu money to be used for public art projects as well. On sister agency properties, CTA, BNSF Railway, UP, schools, parks. The pushback that we receive from the city is that it's ephemera, it's like flowers. They spend $2 million in flowers on Michigan Avenue every year. Why should we invest in it? So this project has helped to, one, create a model for some other public art projects that's happened on the south side and the west side of Chicago, and has also encouraged a campaign that I have sort of picked up to get aldermen to designate anywhere from $10,000 to over $100,000 for public art. So just think on the low end, $10,000 per alderman across the city for public art funding. That's several $100,000. And it's a good start, but it's been a difficult fight, and we're still fighting. They owe me $120,000, which fingers crossed we'll get it. So we've been able to bring in artists from outside of Chicago, leveraging out of state, leveraging local talent, leveraging local nonprofit organizations and institutions to have a part in creating some public artwork. So, and I also run his social media. Which, as you can imagine, for a politician, and all of the things from marijuana ordinance to his, gearing up for his political campaign, and then how do we inject the arts and the importance of arts in the 25th Ward, and the way that he champions arts, reflecting on his voice as an alderman. So it's there's a couple of things, sort of techniques that I've been playing around with for him, and I'm more than welcome to touch on. So Chicago Urban Art Society. My brother is the co-founder and gallery director. I am the executive director. I do all of the administrative, policy, strategic, and pay the bills. And so just to give you an idea, we started off as an exhibition space. We kind of evolved into this space that was really mixed use and diverse in terms of creative activities. I find in Chicago is that there's not a deficit in terms of where artists will make work. Artists will always find a place to make work, and they will always find a place to live, right? To survive, to sleep. The problem is that most art, the deficit is in venue space, right? For artists to perform, to exhibit, at either free cost or no cost, or modest cost. So we've always had these large-scale spaces. We went from 1,200 square feet to 5,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. And so it's really rare. And so we embrace this collaborative spirit. And I think it's all like self-interest, right? Like, why the hell would I do that? Why the hell would I engage with some of my local organizations in the Pilsen community? Does it satisfy my personal agenda? Or do I just not give a shit, right? And I just want to do really cool things in the community and then have activity in the space rather than having it just sit and be dead. So that was really our approach. And my brother's curatorial approach is I like to show what I like. And so with that in mind, there's that broad spectrum of activity. So what we have here is, this is our space, these two really great projects. This is really just like a quick sampling of some of the things that we do. We developed this strategy and space for creative collaborations. which we donate our space to 12 nonprofits a year. It's the worst business model in the world, right? We receive no grants whatsoever for the organization. We support ourselves through art sales and private rentals, and then some of our independent fundraising, but 0 grants. Next year we'll celebrate our 10-year anniversary, and we give our space for free. And these people will fundraise $5,000 to $20,000. But I'm like, I don't even know if I have rent next month. But we do it because we're really supportive of the projects that are happening in our community. We did do the pop-up art loop grant. We actually programmed with Tristan. We actually came in to sort of revitalize it a few years ago, and we went from a $5,000 budget to a $25,000 budget. We managed 7 spaces downtown. And I think that shift from the vacant storefront model to the alley, larger performances with the fire throwers and all of this circus-like behavior is really tied to the cultural plan and really trying to develop the economy. But really, for lack of a better words, really pimping the arts in a really uncomfortable way. Another one is the Slow and Low Lowrider Festival, which was my brother's idea, who's always been fabricating bicycles in the garage. Started very small scale, 50 cars, 500 people, $2,000 to pull it off. Last year we had over 300 cars, over 4,000 people came out for a budget of about $6,000. So it's really looking at, how can you keep your costs really low, leverage your funds. All of this collaborative work we did 8-9 years ago is really just come back to help us out in so many different ways. But it's understanding other people's self-interest. What do you want out of this? How can I help you? I'm just being very transparent and upfront about that. We just picked up a couple satellite spaces in Pilsen. We have one in the Mana Contemporary building, a couple others in Pilsen. We do all of these culinary, creative mixed-use activities. The Pilsen Flea Market, they have a Dead Celebration, partnerships with Vocalo. And again, this all goes back to venue. There aren't enough spaces, large-scale spaces in Chicago that are open. If you don't fit with their vision or mission, you don't have a chance to produce your project. And so we give that, we curate and we're selective. Okay.
I find it really amazing that, speaking of fire dancers, that the city gave Redmond Theater, which features fire dancers, $1 million to do something on the river this year, and you can't even get arts grants.
Redmond is right behind my gallery.
Granted, it's a very different thing. I'm not down no. It's totally different. But that's something the city can get on board with because they are so short-minded in their grant giving and money giving.
Well, they want big bang for their buck.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They're all about splash and show. The city, yes, they want all of that. And part of my little rant here, and I'll be very quick about this, is DK's just released that grant, where they're going to be giving $50,000 or $200,000 to organizations with a $3 million operating budget or more. And they want these institutions because Chicago, they all think that, the world revolves around SAIC and MCA. But, it's kind of a joke to think that these large-scale institutions are, where innovation is happening. And forget about our communities.
When you said, it almost slid by in passing, I just want to make sure we all noticed it. When you said that you managed to get all 50 aldermen to agree to kick in.
We've got Hispanic Caucus and the Black Caucus on board. I need some.
So if you get everybody, that's $500,000, and you said you're 120,000 short. So that's how many aldermen we are short currently? 12?
Something like that.
And that's out of their discretionary budgets or their campaign?
Discretionary. Okay. Danny was very giving to give me campaign dollars because not many people are willing to do that.
Yeah.
Out of discretionary.
And that will be administered through your organization?
Yeah, and so we have this proposal process. Folks can submit sketches for space, and there's 2.5 miles, so there's more than enough space to go around. So we've been selective, and we have a little committee. But for the most part, people submit an application, you will get space on the wall. Some people do it for free. Some people have done it for $100. They don't want any money. They just want to be able to do a 50-foot wall by 20-foot high, and they're loving it. And that is enough pub and promotion to just last us for months. And it's an international and national recognized little program in Pilsen. Bus tours, bike tours, it's ridiculous. I should get paid for that.
It's totally necessary. We know why $2 million a year goes to flowers on Michigan Avenue. I mean, that just can't.
Yeah.
There's this. That just just
Yeah.
we can't sustain.
And
it.
that's the problem
crazy.
with the percent for art program through the city is because any projects that are done on city property have to go through a bid process. They have this, DK says this independent committee, and then so not everyone is going to get a chance to be able to write a sophisticated, application or have the time, and then you get vetted and then they have their own interests and it just becomes a ridiculous mess. Here, it's more localized, we can target some local groups, local artists, and then be more invite only type. So real quick, one of our first panels that we did many years ago before transitioning was this muscle and the hustle. And I don't have any sophisticated academic words. I'm in grad school right now, so all that shit has just left my head. But this is really sort of how we've sort of built the organization and the collaborative, opportunities that we've had and our friends. It's just really, embracing, right, all of our failures, our challenges, and our successes. We knew it wasn't going to be easy. It was a major risk-taking endeavor. We didn't have any money to start the project. We still don't have any money to sustain ourselves. I think it's really important to just be, fiercely protective of your brand and your identity. So when I was thinking about this panel, real quick, I'm going to go through this really quickly. My background is in social work. I'm not an artist or an art maker. And I was thinking about how do we project ourselves on social media? We all know the mechanics of it. We all kind of got a grasp on it. Hashtag this, hashtag that, what platforms you use, all that good stuff. But some straightforward methods that we sort of employ when we're doing our social media has a lot to do with how we sort of internalize in the psychology of how we want to be seen in the public sphere. And I want to say, as much as I love social media, I also want to say I love print, and I invest in it, and I pick it up everywhere. New City, of course. Everyone should invest in this magazine right here. It's the best fucking magazine out there to really sort of inked. I love it. I love it. There's so many techniques and strategies and just stories that you could really relate to the art sector and the creative sector. But I started this off by this one piece that came out in May by Claire, right? And she talked about these 7 ways to innovate the art world. I'll pass this around because I have stacks and stacks of stuff that I just saved. And the first thing that I always talk about is know your self-interest, know other people's agendas, give people a shout out. On social media, on Facebook. I think it's incredibly important because it just helps to develop that strategic partnership, that collaborative spirit, and then it just everyone knows, it expands your base. Super simple. And I thought it was really great when I read that, so I've been saving it, as you can see from all the folds. Really quick, learn your lingo. Do the homework. There's tons of people who are listing out the top 10 ways, and all of these social media experts. I mean, it's super simple. Don't waste your time on crap. We had to open up a whole bunch of other social media platforms. I just had to kill them all. It was just ridiculous. I'm I can't manage it. I'm one person. TweetDeck, I couldn't even do it. I had 8 different platforms going on. I just had to abandon it and just embrace and love the ones that treat you well and you know how to navigate at midnight when you're in bed and you're tweeting or retweeting. The next 3 are this protect your shit type stuff. Don't get your feelings hurt. Don't get baited into ridiculous conversations online. Understand the difference between public and private sector. But yeah, right. Share your experiences when it makes sense. And I have once I wanted so badly to say some stuff about the DK's grant. Because I wanted so badly. And I held myself, and I wrote it, and I drafted it. And I have tons of drafts, and I go back and reflect, I was really angry at that time. But it just doesn't make any sense. And so, just got to, be a little smarter. But I've tripped up. And I think it just really doesn't help your brand, and it just doesn't help your perception. It's that psychology and the projection. You're always in sort of negotiation. My brother hates this, but I always tell him, mind the metrics. Let's look at the broader context that we're dealing with. Focus on the bigger numbers, and it's just really helpful. We use Squarespace. It's incredibly important. I don't really go on Google Analytics that much, but it's been incredibly helpful for us. Where am I going here? Failure, again, I had the worst experiences on Kickstarter. We failed miserably, and they documented my failure on the cover of the Tribune a few months ago. And that's okay, because I had to accept that it was going to fail. I didn't believe in it. I didn't have the time. I didn't want to invest in it. And I just realized that, that's not my platform for my community and my projects. again, I just had to abandon it. I will never touch it again. It is like the devil for me.
Can you tell us what happened?
So I was part of the World Business Chicago, the Seed Chicago program, where the mayor's office selects like 10 or 12 organizations. And I was there with people who had like seed money, who had fundraised or got like small business loans for like $90,000 to $100,000. So it's a small nonprofit, grassroots minded, right? Collaborative, spirit minded. We're competing with these small businesses who have their venture money. You know, and we're starting with like trying to fundraise $10,000 in a 30-day window of time. The mayor's office is not helpful. World Business Chicago is not helpful. So it just became like another job. It just became another. It was such a difficult period of my life and a waste of my fucking time.
What was the goal?
The goal was we all had to raise like $10,000 across 12 projects. You know, yeah. So we
But
each.
they had the resources to do that, whereas
But they didn't use any of their resources. Like the mayor's office didn't promote it, and I was like, the mayor's not going to let us all fail, and he totally did. So there was like 3 of them that hit their goal, But I mean, it was just a level of time and investment that we just couldn't afford, and I just realized that I wasn't willing to investigate Kickstarter and figure out where we could. What little tags we could lift on there and invest in the video and the pictures and the updates and the gifts. Like it was just too much. Where the Lowrider Festival is incredibly profitable for us because we have such a low setup margin, and so it was horrible. I hate Kickstarter so much. Take time to read the feed. All of the data, knowing your community is incredibly important for us. Follow smart people. Like Abraham, and trust your instincts. I'm always just like reflecting on, my gut feelings, my intuition on particular projects, and how I retweet things. But these were kind of like some guiding principles for us. My brother's not really big into social media, so it's really all on me, and then he'll laugh at me about, different hashtags. I was like, hashtag the shit out of things, Peter, because it gets picked up in these really interesting feeds and it trends in really interesting ways. And we really focus on our geographic area. So we really do promote the heck out of Pilsen. Any of our friends do really interesting projects in the community. So with that, I'll just kick it over to Alex.
We did start a little late,
Yeah.
so we're going to be going over time.
Oh,
But now we actually have people here, which is great.
Guys, we have refreshments. We have orange juice, beer, pick your poison.
I'm so lovely.
We can combine them.
I just want to get
And you
full.
can
Oh,
make
sure.
them-
Of your little shout out?
No.
Did you put my little thing?
Yeah, it should be.
So I'm curious, how did you guys at First Franchise decide to start coming here?
I know, it's been hopping up and down. I wonder.
I just followed you.
Oh, good.
It's very I wonder if
Basically, she connected me with
Are you still being sued by Aaron? No, I just okay.
And they don't have What'd you say?
unfortunately, it's great to
All right, so we're going to do the last presentation here from Allison, who works at the Paul Art Museum, as you can see.
Hi guys. I'm gonna keep it relatively Twitter focused because when Abe asked me to talk about my one failure and one success, I realized I had one personal crusade that I wanted the museum to change, and it got changed because of Twitter, so that was kind of exciting. So that's my lead-in. Just wait till the end when I actually explain what I mean. So this is the DePaul Art Museum. We are in Lincoln Park, right next to the L. We're free, which is awesome.
not many of us are free anymore. We now ask a $5 donation because the university cut our budget. So that's also a major challenge we're facing right now, is that we have 0 ad dollars. As I said, sorry, that's why I haven't responded to your email. So I mentioned earlier, we spent like our first like $7 on a Facebook promoted post, you know, just to see like what would happen. I don't think I'll do it again just because it didn't seem like it really, at least for the show we were dealing with, I don't think it was super worth it. Trying to focus our energies now more toward Instagram and Twitter, because our audience is really strange. We have a really weird mix of, there's our front entrance with our sad sign that says you can't take pictures, you can't eat, you can't talk on your cell phone.
Also coming along with changing the no picture policy.
Hey, that's your spoiler alert.
Okay.
I'm trying to reinvigorate this front wall, because when you walk in, you have like a college student staring you in the face and like maybe says hi and maybe doesn't. So we're trying to work on our presence a little bit when you come in to make feel a little warmer, feel like you know what's going on. We have like a tiny space for, you know, postcards to say what's going on. I'm hoping that this wall can become a little more exciting in the fall. Here are a bunch of students in our space. Our audience, as I was getting at, is a strange mix of like university and Lincoln Park neighbors, and of course all the regular art people that come to everything. But we're trying to, when you try to split your audience between 18 to 22-year-olds and then like 65 plus retirees, neither of them are really on Twitter. College kids are Facebookers, and Facebook isn't working anymore, so we're really really tough to figure out how to get anyone to know what's going on inside our building, because even though we're right next to the train, you really can't tell what's going on from the outside. We do have a little window that pops out over the train that has a rotating display of what's going on with our exhibitions, but unless you're taking the Red Line north, you're not going to see it as clearly as we'd hope. So that's been kind of a tricky thing with one of the challenges I face is how to get to our audience, which could not be on more separate sides of the spectrum with no money to get to them. So,
what do you mean by when you say Facebook is working?
Like we were saying, like that there's no reach.
Okay.
You know, I can post something and it says 25 people saw this.
Right.
You know,
It's really hard to overstate how bad this has
so
been,
bad.
and how
it's really bad.
how critically sort of devastating this has been
I could probably get into
to
my
art
Facebook
organizations.
It's crazy.
We're reaching literally 1%
Yeah.
of people, and this is affecting.
I mean, you can see up here it says this
everybody.
week 10 page likes, 70 was our post reach.
And this is largely because of Facebook going public.
Yes.
And now there are shareholders to please and ways to monetize. And so really it's totally...
And then I
Turn down the volume.
paid my $7 to reach 5,000 people who didn't RSVP to our event. You know, so I don't know what to do. So we ended up opening an Instagram to reach our college students, and that's been much more successful.
Wait till that goes public, then we're all screwed.
It's actually already. Instagram got bought for $1 billion
From
by
Facebook,
Facebook.
yeah.
Oh, great.
And they're
But they
starting ads.
retained. The guy who started it retained some very key elements of it. So he actually personally approves every ad that goes on Instagram.
They're pretty good looking.
So it's not gonna, and that's why he did that. So it's not gonna. There's a potential for that change. But anytime, that's the inherent danger of this panel, is that anytime we invest our time and our energy into social media, it's owned by somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's really critical that we understand that, is
Exactly.
that we're basically building value for somebody else. So I think it's completely fair to us, for us to ask for value back from these places.
Because they're getting all of our stats and all that crazy stuff. But so my Twitter success story is maybe not the best moral of the story, is that if you're cranky, you're going to get what you want. But we had some cranky people on Twitter talking about how they couldn't take pictures at the museum. And I take everything really personally. Like every time someone unsubscribes from our e-newsletter, I like get sad for a second. And every time like someone like, you know, says like, oh, I can't take a picture at the art museum, what the hell? And it's like, I understood that with no money, the best thing we could do is let people take pictures of things, because how else is anyone going to know what the hell is going on at the museum? So I had to come up against some kind of old school bosses that were like, well, if it says something in the loan agreement, about no photography, then we can't allow photography. I'm like, no one is going to take a picture of this and make a mouse pad and sell it. Like, people just want to share it on Twitter. Like, a cell phone picture is not going to do anything, beyond,
well, I think this is an interesting moment to acknowledge the fact of how much, not eminent domain, copyright and public domain, intellectual property, all these things are completely, like, slippery now, and we're just in a, we're dealing with a new...
I think the best...
get over it. I mean, it just...
it's like...
The funniest tweet, I don't know if it was one of the cranky people you're referring to, but the funniest tweet out of all those people, I think I know a bunch of them, who were talking about it. I think I was one of them, perhaps.
Probably.
But the collector that actually owned that
it was Scott Hunter.
This collector took a picture of a piece in his collection that was on loan for the show, and it was, illustrating the point. He couldn't take a picture in your museum of a piece he actually, it was hilarious.
It was that was like the biggest, like that,
if you couldn't bring that to your bosses,
that was a moment that I was like, I can't believe that I'm at home and I can't, I was like going to throw up. So I used all of that to kind of say, like, look, guys, like, we don't have any money. I think, like, no press in this case, like, neutral responses is better than people having negative experiences at the museum. So finally, they said, they let me open the Instagram account. We can start letting people take pictures. Coincidentally, thank God, the shows that we had kind of from 2014 now and going forward are mainly all permanent collections. We don't have the same kind of loan agreement problems that I can imagine popping back up again in conversation. But it's like the biggest win I've ever had. And there's still some skepticism. Like, we had an intern running our Instagram, and one of our directors wanted her to run by every picture she put up there.
Well,
and it was like,
to that point, it's interesting because obviously this has opened up so much, and what we're doing at Locust, when a lot of other, we realized that PS1 was doing this cool program where when they were having artist exhibit, they would just let them do an Instagram takeover, and we're increasingly just super, the more fluid we get with our permissions, the better our content is, the more, it's just exciting, it just doesn't have that clamped down feel, institutional feel. So we're trying to do these Instagram takeovers and just open up the content more.
We had a day in April that there was an Instagram meetup, and they came to the museum. I wasn't there that day. I didn't know they were coming, but had they showed up and they couldn't take pictures, I mean, that would have been devastating. Instead, we added 45 pictures to hashtag DePaul Art Museum or DPAM or whatever, or onto the map of pictures, and it just felt great. It's those people had a great day at the museum. I had great interaction with them in comments, and it just felt this is fantastic. This is the point. This is why we are a free museum, and people can come in on a Saturday and have a great time and have a chair fight, which gave me a heart attack. But
did you have a point?
I was just going to say, I think by kind of providing a stream of what's happening, it makes it more of a human experience.
Totally.
It's everything's really pretty, it looks perfect.
Right.
And it's just it's all just like this.
Right.
You actually see process. You actually, I think, are kind of creating more connection with that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I think was really exciting about being able to share this kind of behind-the-scenes stuff. It's this picture of our curator in Dawood Bay picking out photos for an exhibition he was putting up. I think had 36 likes or something. I mean, it's just a different experience. You get to see the behind-the-scenes, and we are an educational space, so we need to understand. I don't want to say college students don't matter because they're not coming. It's this is a way for them to understand what's happening at their museum and what the public gets to see, which they don't always get to see. The kind of dirty work. And I think this picture, I was nervous, my butt was hanging out, but I was literally painting the wall for our exhibition, so it's just showing that we all get down and dirty is really cool. I mean, I think that's what people need to see. We're a staff of 4 with 3 interns, and we got to do what we can, but it's really hard.
Well, I think this point is very interesting, especially from my experience, because I'm working for a corporate entity, which is Expo Chicago, and myself, and I wish Stephanie was here, she's our social media manager, we're constantly fighting to keep it more fluid and to keep it more off the cuff and interesting, and there's so much pushback to do that, which I'm sure you
I mean, we kind of operate a little bit rogue within the university, but on a daily basis, I'm part of the DePaul social media listserv, which is interesting to think about as maybe something to move forward for other social media managers in the city to kind of all be on a Google group or something. I don't know if that exists still anymore, but I get every day an email from the athletic department or from financial aid being tweet this to your followers. Financial aid is due next week. And it's like, I'm not going to tweet that to my followers, you know? But then I think on the other side of it, the university doesn't always retweet what we are doing. You know, we have a couple super fans, like the Humanities Center at the university and stuff. There's some fans that, they support what we're doing, but even within the university, we have no idea what's going on, let alone what's in the city, what's going on. I mean, when we schedule events, it's like, well, there could be a huge opening of a theater production that night, and DePaul Theater is, I guess it's so Chicago. We're a little mini version of Chicago, but, theater and music, they have a million events going on that we don't know about. And we're trying to start an kind of university arts corridor kind of conversation about, like, ways that the art museum, the theater school, and the music school can kind of help each other out a little bit, too, because we feel like we're kind of the forgotten child, and theater and music is such a big deal at DePaul that if we can hook on with them, then right, the theater kids, that we can all kind of, if we had a hashtag Arts at DePaul, something similar to what we're thinking here with art and
Yeah, you should just talk to the Columbia College people because they had the same issue, and they really made a success of the Wabash Arts Corridor crawl that they're going to do on the Friday night of Expo actually.
Oh, cool.
But so we're helping them promote that, doing shuttles and all of that. And sidebar conversation, I'd be interested in talking to you about what we could do to
I think I've been in touch with some of you guys for some stuff, but...
You should definitely be in touch with me because I do the...
Perfect.
So I know that we're running a little bit over, but I'd just kind of like to ask one last question, and then maybe we can all kind of go with it, and then we'll move on to Ross Jordan's presentation, which...
There was one more in there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, real quickly,
Sure.
what you were talking about with the Paul University of Chicago is just
they have the
initiative to do, and we publish a magazine for that.
Right.
That's kind of
It's beautiful.
I know, it's really nice. I mean, I wish I know this is being recorded, but, I feel like the university felt like they kind of gave us a new building and then thought they can kind of leave us alone. So I don't feel like we have necessarily all of the financial support that we wish we could to do, beautiful, amazing arts on campus, with such a built-in audience. I mean, there's 1 billion kids that go to DePaul, and 1 billion of them graduate with business.
There.
Yeah, and they all have business degrees, that can give money back, but they don't,
So my kind of decor, so this is like a last question. I hope we can kind of bat around a little bit to just think a little bit abstractly. Abraham and I were talking a little bit about this. There's a weird slippage when we're all dealing with marketing professionals. Obviously, we all care about the arts. You're an artist. Where is the line between sort of self-promotion and actual, like a fostering of a cultural growth or cultural identity? And I have similar challenges with managing the PR at my organization, and also have different sort of mindsets. Like I'm trying to cultivate donors. I'm trying to share programming. They actually go hand in hand, trying to just, support artists. So and then there's this weird edge where we're trying to promote ourselves. We're paying attention to our own Twitter feeds. That's really the only reason we care about these things sometimes is because we want to see how we're being.
Right.
It's a familiar territory to check our own social platforms. That's the thing we're most familiar with is who's looking at us. Mm-hmm. We're really not as familiar with whatever else is happening sometimes. So anyway, I wonder if we could bat that around for just a few more minutes. Self-promotion versus wider cultural growth.
I just would jump in there. I think that everybody behaves in a self-interested way.
Yes.
In a lot of, and I think that's, both a good thing and a bad thing.
There is no true altruism in social media.
Very capitalistic way, but I think ultimately, the more you contribute out of this idea of, if everybody was self-promoting, then everything would be out there. And that's sort of the point of maybe one of the ideas of this panel, is that if we're all self-promoting, then everything would be out there. And I mean, that's a very sort of capitalist sort of at the root of it idea,
neoliberal,
free market type of thing. But I think it's also a very fundamental truth of this. If everybody advocates for what they're doing, what they want to, then everything would be out there. And I think that that's the real potential of what Twitter offers us. Is it offers a very horizontal, democratic, unfiltered type of thing. And you said, so what if hashtag art and shy got totally crammed up with, junk and uninteresting stuff and the street art fairs. And I was like, that'd be great, because then that would be a sign of success, where we've gotten to a point where there's so much stuff being published on this tag that it needs to be winnowed down. You know, that's something where you look to the visual list for that type of, you know,
More curated
specific
content.
curator type of stuff. But I would much rather err on the side of including every single community across Chicago on a platform like Twitter, where it's unfiltered and horizontal.
Or Instagram, really, I mean, because it's visual. So
Well, Instagram doesn't have that same, even though it's owned by Facebook, it's still unfiltered. Instagram still will show you every single thing that you get.
So everybody
and-
hashtag art and cheap for any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Can I
so-
jump in real? Oh, sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, when it comes to self-promotion too, I think that we have to be concerned with creating the best quality content we can individually, so that I am comfortable saying, like, yeah, I'll retweet that shit. Like, yeah, that's fucking cool. Like, people need to know about that. But, like, it needs to be...
Self-curation.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, editing and all good things, yeah, but I mean... I don't know.
Because that's a reaction to people putting out sloppy content.
Yeah, I think that it's, I mean, like, when there's a really great article, like, yeah, click on, you have to click, a must read, you know, like, that's when I can say something that's, you know, true to the actual thing that they're looking at, instead of
When
just
it's
being
good,
like,
it's good.
let's, you know, let's spread art around the world, you know, I mean, like...
Right, it's less general. And to your point, there is this high degree of selectivity in visual art and visual culture, and there is a high degree of choosing and filtering. And
I just think, again, back to that self-promotion, like, it's not a dirty word.
No.
But we need to be aware of our self-promotion, be actualized in that.
We all need to let our egos run wild. And
And the only thing I regret is that we don't have a representative from Bad Sports here today.
oh, that's good.
Well, yes.
You do?
I'm proud, yes.
Yeah, and so do I.
And half of everybody else does. That's great.
Because they could have, definitely added to that conversation. Are you familiar with Bad Sports?
I am, and they're awesome. And so you had worked with them, and can you say anything about their content and how specific their content is? So specific. It's contemporary art. It's the best. Like it's their selections from contemporary art.
I think other people here have probably written for them longer,
Uh-huh.
or been involved longer. I just do them like monthly, what you should have noticed in Chicago, slightly sardonically post.
Okay.
Also, I feel I need to add for the photography crowd, Filter Photo Festival. Tanner Young runs their social media feed, and Pepper Kelly's the managing director, and they're expanding into more. Tanner's doing more writing and profiles and things like that. And if you're interested in contemporary photography, it's definitely a good sort of aggregation point. Also, Tanner's always had, if you are a photographer or at a gallery having a show or something, submit your stuff to Filter. Tanner is having an impossible time filling up the calendar, just like the simple calendar of shows, because apparently photographers are just as terrible as so many other artists at promoting ourselves.
Well, some of them are quite good, and they're and to another point, like there's plenty of artists that use social media as part of their practice, not to promote themselves, not to be their own PR machine, but embracing it, and that's freaky and really cool, and I think we can think about that. But I want to thank you guys all so much, and I think we should take 5 and then...
Can I say one more thing very quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the scene, you all may not be familiar with it, it's part of Expo Chicago, but it's completely autonomous. We have fought very hard for that. It's editorial, great editorial content, and we'd like for you all to follow it and send us tweets and send us information, and we will review shows.
And I just want to close with the final thought, is that what I hope comes out of this panel is some sort of more cohesive movement between all of us doing our own self-interested things in that very Adam Smith type of way, but whatever the suggested tag is, whether it's shy art and shy, it's going to take a lot more than the 4 panelists up here today. It's going to take everybody constantly using it, spreading the word, doing it over time, if that's something that we want. And I think, I think we did dwell on the dangers of what that is, the increasing marginalization of visual art as a whole spectrum. So just think about, exactly what Joshua was saying. Just think about those types of things when you self-promote. It's not just self-promoting as a 4-letter word. Like, it's so much other stuff.
Right. Self-promotion, self-awareness.
Yeah, and creating those constellations.
Wouldn't
so
it
just
be
use that
interesting
stuff.
if your organization or an organization like it took upon themselves to like anonymously mail every single art space or in town like a card that says like hashtag art and chi, and just like see what happens and see if everyone starts, and like do it a couple, like just get the everywhere. I'm curious to see what.
Well, I don't even think we need to mail it. Like, we don't need to do. I mean, no offense, but
something that's like
it's already rolling on Twitter.
All I mean is like a campaign that reaches everybody and says like, pay attention to this, and it just,
sure.
It could be something as simple as making a picture and starting it on Instagram and just like sharing
and
it
just
through there and then having that retweeted.
That's for all you guys to figure out. You're marketing geniuses.
Any reason we can do shy art? You say 2 characters.
That's high school.
Oh, cool. That makes sense.
That's what I thought too. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, everyone. In just a few minutes, I hope you stay put because we're going to get started with the second roundtable of the afternoon.
What is that one?
This one is called Beer Summit.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'd love to. I've got to get to some and then I'm going to get back down to the city for someone's closing. There's like so much stuff going on. Yeah, it's my annual. Why is it come down to pretty much like our one sort of credit drama, because the artist in front of me, she's there with like 36 other artists. It's the last one of this sort of they've been in forever. So sort of looking at some new houses. I'm an artist. I started with a sculpture installation. And I've got an interest in this just because I was super active with Twitter presence, and that's like how all these people. And I've done some art writing here and there, and one of the large experience so I'm getting more and more active. They're not as predictive. I've seen that.
There's a lot of
yeah, I'd love to. I'm down for Miami Basil or check it out. I just, nobody knows who I am on Instagram. I need to follow you on Instagram. Yeah, I just followed you guys. So this is what are your Instagram Locust projects?
Our Twitter is kind of it's active, but it's kind of passive.
I noticed that immediately when I was shooting you. Yeah. A lot of people do that. But yeah, Facebook's... I just was finally put into the last person in the world not on Instagram a few months ago, and it's my new social media platform, favorite platform. I love it. And it's, it is where you can find like all the college kids that are on Facebook and stuff. Yeah, because Facebook is just sucks. I don't see, or if I want to catch up on something like my class on the screen, I have to look regular thing. If I want to see what some organization is doing, it's terrible. 90% of what I see there is like shit I don't want to see, so all my friends on Twitter. It's really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'll hang out a little bit.
What is your name? Jason. Jason, okay.
What was the, is there a separate account for, I'm sorry, I'm going to find this out.
Maybe here?
No, the separate autonomous thing.
Oh, the scene. Yeah. It's an online journal. And if you just go to our website, there's a link to it there.
Are you guys writing it?
We are. It's Chicago is the Twitter handle. So the scene doesn't have its own Twitter publishing at some point. But Stephanie, who's our editor-in-chief, who works on iCloud, said, last year, if you have any content, please send it to us. Definitely.
I'm starting a project every next few months where I'll be, there's no one doing
Absolutely. Please email me your contact information. I'll introduce you to Stephanie. And she's our editor-in-chief, and she can talk directly with you about that. Because we're very interested in different things that aren't being represented. And, even though we are part of an art fair, we're very, as I said, autonomous.
It's cool. Yeah, I really wish Tanner from Filter
I'd love to meet you.
There's like this weird little photography camera. We sort of like stay in our little neighborhood. I'm the one like really capacity for
Well, we need more of them. We need John Oppenheimer and talking about this process of meeting and photography.
I wasn't there.
I'd love to please meet you.
It's definitely you can.
And all the campus stuff.
It's good to see you.
I did miss last night.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, so I tried to take advantage of the business, but also it works for me. Thanks for signing up. Oh, sure. Are you? I'm Mia. I actually do care one of several, but I oh my God. Abraham, I went to grad school with Abraham. Oh, you did? Yeah. Okay. It's very good to see everybody. I like that. Yeah, I will. So you'll be a special exhibition visiting in the room. We're working on it. Yeah. Okay. See if we can swing it. We have such a we have a tight you know, everybody's tight, but we're just like well, I hope it works out. Yeah. If I can find it. Oh, it's so nice. Well, I think we have to quit. Thank you. I was watching. Oh, appreciate it. Thursday.